The air in the nursery was unnaturally still. Emily stood near the crib, arms crossed tightly against her chest, as if holding herself together by force. Ava slept soundly, her breath rising and falling in gentle waves. Max lay curled near the crib, unmoving except for the occasional flick of his tail. The night was unusually quiet. No rustling branches, no creaking floors, just silence so complete it seemed oppressing on all sides. Emily didn't know what would happen, but she felt it. Something was building, waiting. For nights now, the energy in the house had shifted. The presence, once sporadic and mysterious, had grown consistent, almost deliberate. It came every night. It stood by Ava's crib. It watched, and every time, Max would post himself like a soldier at a station, never attacking, never backing down. Jake no longer questioned her. After the last video, after seeing the faint outline of a girl in the corner of the footage with his own eyes, his denial cracked. He hadn't spoken much since. He avoided the nursery. He avoided Emily's eyes. But he stayed home. That, in itself, was something. Tonight, Emily had a plan. Not to banish the presence. Not to confront it. But to try, finally to understand. She sat on the edge of the rocking chair, the old locket resting in her palm. She'd polished it that afternoon, gently cleaning away decades of grime. Now, it gleamed faintly in the soft light of the room's night lamp. She had left the floorboard slightly open, where she'd first found it, as if inviting the past to come forward. Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked past 3, and then the mobile above the crib began to turn. No breeze, no motion, just a soft, creaking spin of the small figurines circling lazily in the air. Max rose and sat upright. Emily held her breath. The temperature dropped so suddenly her breath fogged, and from a far corner of the room, the faintest shimmer stirred. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't smoke. It was more like light bent around something that shouldn't exist. The shape of a small girl slowly took form, faint, incomplete, but there, she was barefoot, wearing a nightgown, hair falling in loose waves around a downturned face. She didn't look up. She moved with aching hesitation toward the crib. Max didn't growl. He simply watched. Emily stood slowly. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Lila, that your name?" The figure didn't respond, but it paused. It tilted its head, just slightly, in acknowledgement. Emily reached down and lifted the locket, holding out gently. "I found this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Under the floorboards. It's yours, isn't it?" The air seemed to tighten. The shimmer of the girl moved closer, and for a moment, Emily thought she saw her face. Young, impossibly young, with wide, sorrowful eyes. Ava stirred in her sleep, then smiled again, just like she had before. The girl turned toward her, kneeling slightly, as if trying to touch her, though her hand passed through the crib rails like mist. Her head bowed, and a soft, barely audible sound filled the room. A sigh, a sob, something ancient and aching. Emily took a slow step forward. "You've been protecting her," she said, realizing it as she spoke. "You didn't want to hurt anyone. You just wanted someone to know you were here." The girl nodded once. Emily's eyes blurred with tears. She placed a locket gently on the windowsill beside the crib. "You can rest now. You're not forgotten anymore." The figure lingered for a moment longer, then rose. Light seemed to collect around her, not harsh or bright, but warm, like sunlight through closed eyelids. The room grew brighter, then dimmed, and the girl was gone. Max let out a soft breath and lay back down. Emily stood alone in the silence, tears slipping down her face, not from fear but from a deep, aching sadness slowly turning into peace. Something had lifted. The heaviness in the house, the weight behind the walls, was gone. In the days that followed, everything changed. Ava slept through the night. The monitor remained silent. The cold spots vanished. The air felt different, lighter. Max returned to his easy, playful self, tail wagging freely. And Emily felt like she could breathe again. Jake finally came into the nursery one morning and stood quietly beside her. "I believe you now," he said, his voice low. "I know," Emily replied. She buried the locket beneath the oak tree, in the backyard that afternoon, wrapped it in soft cloth, nestled it in the soil with the baby's shoe beside it. A grave, in a way, or maybe a marker, a place of rest. She planted lilies around it, pure white, peaceful. Every now and then, Ava would crawl toward the nursery corner, giggling, as if someone had called to her. Emily let her. Some presences don't leave because they're trapped. Some stay because they're waiting. And sometimes, all it takes to set them free is to finally be seen. The locket glinted under the dim light of the nursery, delicate in age, nestled in Emily's palm. Its cold metal pressed into her skin, grounding her as her thoughts spiraled. She sat cross-legged on the floor, Max resting tensely beside her, his ears still perked, tail stiff. The hidden space beneath the loose floorboard had yielded a locket and an old, soiled baby shoe, objects that whispered a history and loss. It was no longer a matter of superstition. Something had happened here, something that hadn't moved on. She opened the locket again. Inside, a faded photograph of a baby girl smiled from another era. Opposite it, a delicate engraving. Eldie always watching. The initials sent a chill racing down her spine. She needed answers, but Jake didn't want to hear them. He thought she was unraveling. Maybe she was. But there was a line between fear and instinct, and Emily had crossed it days ago. She moved to the nursery slowly, her eyes trailing over the crib, the walls, the old vent near the corner. Everything seemed still, innocent, but it wasn't. She felt it deep in her bones, a wrongness, subtle yet persistent, like the scent of smoke and clean air. Max wouldn't step foot in the room unless she did, and even then, he paced like a soldier waiting for an attack. He didn't bark anymore. He growled low and constant, as if warning something to stay back. That night, she sat in the living room, laptop open, searching property records and archived newspaper articles. She didn't know what she was looking for until she found it. The headline was blunt, cold in its brevity. Infant girl missing, family devastated. Emily's stomach turned as she opened the article. A photo accompanied the story. A young couple holding a baby in a knitted cap. Around the child's neck hung the exact locket that now lay on her table. The article named the baby Lila Donahue. The family had lived on this very street. In this house, her breath caught. Lila had disappeared from her crib one night without a trace. No sign of forced entry. No clues. The investigation led nowhere. The case went cold. Eventually, the house changed hands. Eventually, Emily and Jake moved in. She leaned back in her chair, the image of Lila's mother etched in her mind, hollow-eyed and desperate. Emily understood that look now. She understood it far too well. The next day, she bought a new baby monitor. One without Wi-Fi, no app, no smart features. Just a motion-activated camera and a tiny SD card. She couldn't trust anything that streamed. Not after what she'd seen. She placed it in the nursery, aimed at the crib. Ava cooed as she was laid down, unaware of the heavy silence pressing around her. Emily watched from the hallway, Max by her side. The monitor remained quiet. The room stayed still. But when she reviewed the footage the next morning, her hands trembled. At 3:17 a.m., the mobile began to spin slowly. Ava slept through it. A shape appeared in the far corner of the frame, vague, translucent, like steam rising in a closed room. It hovered by the crib for less than a minute before vanishing as suddenly as it had come. No sound, no movement from Ava, but Max, just outside the room, could be heard growling low and long, a deep, unrelenting warning. She watched it 3 times before deleting it, not out of fear, out of respect. It felt like witnessing something private, something sacred. The shape hadn't reached for Ava. It had only stood there, silently watching. Jake didn't want to hear about it. He listened in stiff silence as she described what she'd seen, then shook his head. "You're exhausted," he said. "You're seeing patterns where there aren't any." "Then why is Max terrified of that room?" she asked, voice cracking. "Why'd I find a dead girl's locket under the floorboards?" He had no answer, just silence and that same pitying look. That night, Emily didn't sleep in the bedroom. She stayed in the nursery, curled in the armchair with Max at her feet. Ava breathed softly in the crib, fingers twitching in dreams. Hours passed in silence until, just before 3, Max rose and moved the crib. He didn't bark. He sat, guarding. Emily watched, heart pounding. The air cooled. The mobile turned. No shapes appeared, no whispering voices. Just a presence. A deep, aching sadness that filled the room like fog. She whispered into the darkness. "Lila, is that you?" Silence. Then Ava stirred. Her tiny hand reached upward, not at Emily, but toward the corner of the room, toward nothing. She smiled. Emily didn't move. She felt tears gather, spill down her cheeks. Not from terror, from grief, for a child who had been lost, forgotten, buried beneath time and silence, and for the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been entirely alone. The room warmed again. Max settled beside the crib. Whatever had come that night had not come to harm. It had come to be seen. Emily Hartley sat in the dim glow of the hallway nightlight, cradling a lukewarm mug of tea she no longer intended to drink. The baby monitor buzzed softly beside her, its screen aglow with the grayscale image of her daughter sleeping in the crib upstairs. Outside, wind dragged the branches of the old oak against the siding with a scratchy insistence. Rain lashed the windows in frantic bursts. And Max, her golden retriever, barked again. It wasn't a sharp, alarm bark. Not at first. It started low, uncertain. One bark every few minutes, then shorter intervals, then louder, quicker. Emily glanced down. Max stood stiffly in the living room, ears back, eyes locked on the monitor. "Max," she said gently. "What is it, boy?" He didn't move. Only his tail twitched, a slow, uneasy sway. Then came a growl, deep and guttural, building in his chest like he was staring down a threat only he could see. Emily rose, walking over with caution, the tea forgotten on the side table. She crouched and ran her fingers through his fur, murmuring, "It's just a storm. You're okay. Nothing's wrong." But Max wasn't listening. He lunged at the monitor, snapping his jaws once at the screen. Emily gasped, pulling out of reach. The baby, Ava, still lay in her crib, perfectly still, perfectly safe. The room was quiet. A lullaby tune floated softly from the mobile above her head, its plush animals gently turning in circles. Still Max stared. Later that night, Emily lay awake beside her sleeping husband, listening. Max paced the hallway outside their door. Every few minutes, he would stop and let out a whine or a quiet bark, then resume his rounds. Emily checked the monitor again and again. Ava was fine, but Max wouldn't settle. The next morning brought clear skies and the scent of fresh rain. Emily hoped the strange behavior would pass with the storm. But that night, as she tucked Ava in and turned on the monitor, Max's reaction returned, more intense this time. He planted himself in front of the nursery door, barked sharply, and refused to budge when Emily tried to move him. Jake rubbed his eyes, emerging from the bedroom. "What's going on now?" "Max is freaking out again," Emily said, exasperated. "Same as last night." At the monitor, Jake leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "He's probably just picking up static or something. Dogs are weird. You remember how he used to go nuts when the toaster popped? This is different. He's scared." Jake knelt to pet Max, but the dog recoiled. His eyes never left the monitor screen in Emily's hand. She turned it toward Jake. "See?" "Nothing. Just Ava." Jake peered at it, shrugged. "Maybe he's being protective. New baby, new sounds he's adjusting like us." Emily nodded, though doubt lingered. Something about Max's stare. It wasn't alert. It was haunted. Over the next week, Max's behavior escalated. Each night, as soon as Ava was laid down and the monitor flicked on, Max barked, growled, or paced. He stopped entering the nursery altogether, even during the day. Instead, he'd sit at the threshold, low whining replacing his usual cheerful demeanor. Emily started to notice things she couldn't explain. Once, when she went to change Ava's sheets, she found the baby mobile spinning on its own, slowly, steadily, though no windows were open and the ceiling fan was off. Another time, while reviewing monitor footage after hearing a strange crackling noise, she caught a brief flicker of movement, just a flash in the corner of the crib, like a shadow slipping out of view. She told Jake. He laughed it off. Our daughter's not haunted. Maybe you need a break from all this. Postpartum is tough. Don't forget to breathe, okay? She didn't tell him about the whisper. It happened on the third night after the flicker. The monitor began glitching, short bursts of static in the audio feed. Picture flickering like an old film reel. Emily leaned close, trying to catch a sound she couldn't place. Between the static came a voice, low, faint, impossible. Don't leave, it whispered. Her blood turned cold. She replayed it 3 times. On the third listen, it was clearer. The same words. Don't leave. Male. Breathy. Unearthly. Max barked violently from the hallway, snapping her out of it. The monitor screen returned to normal. That night, she couldn't sleep. Ava's room seemed darker than usual, despite the soft blue nightlight shaped like a moon. The house, one so familiar, felt full of corners she hadn't noticed before. The following morning, Emily joined a parenting forum, posting cautiously about Max's strange behavior and the glitching monitor. The responses were what she expected. Some jokes, some fellow parents who'd experienced weird noises, even one who claimed baby monitors were portals if you're not careful. She closed the tab, feeling no better. A few nights later, something changed. Max didn't bark immediately. Instead, he stood at the base of the stairs, trembling, head lowered. When Emily called him, he didn't come. She walked over, kneeling down, and placed a hand on his back. His muscles were rigid. What is it? She whispered. He looked up at her, eyes pleading, and turned toward the nursery. Then he walked, slowly, until he reached the door and stopped. He scratched once at the floor, then lay down, staring inside. Emily followed, confused. She entered the nursery, everything looking as it should. She turned on the monitor again. Ava stirred lightly but didn't wake. The static resumed, subtle this time. The camera glitched just once, long enough for Emily to catch sight of something that froze her where she stood. A shape, faint, just beyond the crib. It didn't move, didn't speak, but it was there. She looked down. Max had followed her in, something he hadn't done in a week. He walked to the plug on the wall, the one that powered the monitor's camera, and bit it cleanly from the socket. Emily screamed, "Max!" The monitor went dark. She knelt beside him, checking his mouth. He hadn't been shocked, thankfully, but he looked at her like he'd just saved her from something terrible. She didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, while changing Ava, Emily noticed something on the crib's wooden headboard. At first, she thought it was a smudge, but when she wiped it, it didn't go away. It wasn't dirt. It was a print, tiny, like a hand, pressed into the wood from the inside. She stood frozen, Ava gurgling in her arms. The air around her seemed to still. She went downstairs, Max at her heels. She held her daughter close and turned on the monitor again, not expecting anything to happen in daylight. Nothing unusual showed. Just Ava's crib, empty for the moment. The mobile, the gentle arc of sunlight through the window. But Max watched it anyway, silent, unblinking. And Emily knew something wasn't right. Not with the monitor, not with the nursery, not with the house. Max was trying to tell her something. And for the first time since bringing Ava home, Emily felt afraid to be alone with her baby in that room.